Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's Best Medicine. I'm Michael Adamthwaite. I'm joined by a very special friend of mine and very special guest. This is Sean Penner. Sean is one of those heroes without a cape who does his utmost in the field of first responders. Sean's here today to talk about what it is to be one of those highly trained people who goes into dangerous places to do dangerous things for strangers, quite frankly. So, Sean, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I've been a paramedic for 31 years. And in joining the paramedicine world, I managed to also get into the heavy urban search and rescue training and deployments, such.
So, heavy deployments that go into really dangerous places. You get a pretty cool name, like heavy deployment. Bam, bam.
Yeah.
Is it the big guns that people imagine that they see on TV?
Well, it's not quite what they see on TV, but we are certainly one of the highest trained teams in the world. We're working on getting our internationally deployable classification currently.
Wow.
It just means more budgets. And, so when we go on a deployment like that, we would leave our equipment there and not bring it home because of the expenses and that. So they
Right.
need that money to have that extra deployment cash to leave at a site once we go there and such. So we're working on
So
that.
so it's a lot of gear in dangerous places, doing dangerous jobs. How did you get your start as far as like I'm a young person living in, small town BC, and I decide this is what's for me. This is my future. How did it all start?
Well, my story is probably a little bit strange because I never really knew what I wanted to do as far as being a paramedic. Um, I was living in a small town and asked to join the service, and I thought, well, I'll see what it's like. So can I ride third with the crews and see what the experience is like? And during my 3 months of carrying the pager, I never got a call because when I did go off, I was out of town for something personal or whatever.
Right.
So one day the boss phones me and says, I put in your application, we got your employee number came in today, so you're hired. Yeah.
Deep end, just jump in. You're hired.
Yeah. So I
That's pretty
was
cool.
like, oh, okay. And he says, by the way, if you don't work with me tonight, there's no service in town. So yeah, that was my introduction to the ambulance
No,
service.
no pressure. You just
No,
like,
no.
hey, if you don't show up, there's no emergency services for the entire town.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. No. How old were you? That's big adult pressure.
I was 25.
Okay, so not exactly fresh out of high school. You've
No, I
been
had some life experience. I had my first aid and let it lapse for a previous job I had. I was a professional driver, so no driver training needed and such like that. But yeah, it was just a thrust into the melee because within 2.5 hours we got our first call, and it was a single vehicle MVA with two unconscious patients into a rock face. So
whoa.
yeah, I was thrust straight into this, like a lot of paramedics actually are. It's a trial by fire. It seems like.
Is there any sort of, and I mean, I've heard it in a lot of films. I'm sure a lot of people have heard it in the military, in any sort of armed line of the services branch of the government or the military. There's always this sort of like, welcome to Hell Week. Here's the grizzled chat from the old guy. Like the warning, you're gonna see all kinds of like body, like was there anything to prepare you for what would ultimately, become like your first MBA, multiple patients unconscious into a rock face?
No, nothing at all.
Wow.
No, it was quite the journey for sure.
And small town accidents are, if I'm not mistaken, different because they're isolated. And small town BC, I mean, you're from Edgewood. It's a lovely little town. I've been there a couple times myself. You get to a point where you automatically have to factor in the drive time and the conditions. Tell me a little bit about your driver training leading up to, deciding to join the service because you're also, and I mean, Sean wouldn't share this, I'm going to say, Sean's an incredibly talented driver. He's a driver instructor. You've worked at multiple levels of driver training and driver instruction. Was it something that, was birthed out of, I really like to drive, or was it 100% function? I got to be able to be that guy fast through the mountains to get where we need to go.
Initially, for me, when I was a kid, I just loved to drive.
Yeah,
Then, when I took commercial transport mechanic license, in order to test the vehicles that I was going to be driving, I had to take my class one license,
yeah.
and that just advanced from there into a job where I was mechanicking and truck driving, and then I drove school bus for a while, so a lot of driver training there for safety and such, and that was my prelim prior to the ambulance service.
Any wrecks early on that stuck with you before you joining the service or early on in the service?
I had come across a few accidents. My dad was a paramedic and started the ambulance service in Edgewood many years ago. So in riding with him just down the roads, we come across accidents. And
Yeah,
I had gone over the bank to help nurses down to the scene and, carried equipment and done stuff like that. So I'd had a little bit of exposure. My dad, spoken about calls that he'd done throughout his time in the service.
yeah. Your dad ever pull you out of a ditch as a teenager?
No, fortunately not. Yeah, no.
That's always the worry. You're like,
Yeah.
oh man, I live in a small town. My dad's the only guy waiting by the phone because the phone rings at my personal house. If there's an emergency, he's gonna find out. Oh, who's in a ditch? Young Sean Penner.
I'm sure it was a concern the way I drove at the time. While I was testing the limits of the road, me and the vehicle. But there was nobody on the roads out there. It was very
Yeah,
rural at the time. So
yeah. It feels like one of
still not
those.
right, but I.
Well, yeah, and it feels like one of those instances where if you feel any inclination towards I'm going to be in a job where I'm going to be pushed, I'm going to be in a position where I'm going to be tested, I have to be ready for anything. I kind of feel like not to piggyback an energy, but there's definitely something about the prove myself to myself because I don't know what's coming. Preparation, if you will, and then you find yourself in the service. And I mean, now all these years later, every minute of that was worth it.
Certainly, it has served me well in my time driving the ambulance service, having all that previous experience, knowing how a vehicle reacts and all kinds of weather conditions and things like that. It's made me a much safer driver, and I do get a lot of compliments from my attendants that I really appreciate that. It made it a lot easier to work on the patient. So it's
Yeah,
continuity of care too. It's not just about getting there safely, but you have to think about somebody's working physically with an individual in the back to maybe save their life.
yeah,
Sometimes it's not
yeah,
always like that. We don't. The severity of calls for the ambulance service has changed over the years. We used to do a lot of high acuity calls, but now our high.
what would you consider high acuity, and how would you break down severity? Is it like a scale on 1 to 5, 1 to 10?
So that's based on patient presentation. So the sicker the patient, the higher the acuity. It could be a heart attack, it could be a car accident, it could be a stroke. So depending on the presentation of the patient determines the severity of the call. So call a patient who has a headache, who has no stroke-like symptoms, who has a gradual onset, wouldn't be considered as serious as somebody who had a sudden blinding pain in their head, and a loss of movement in the right side.
Right. So
So
obviously, information is key. Communication is key. In the 21st century, a lot of technology has become key. I know because you and I have shared a lot of conversations about what it's like to load, uh, you know, um, an ambulance or like the bus, the shop, the office. Right? There's so many words. We hear a lot of words in TV and fantasy land, like I'm going to the bus. I'm running to the tank. Right? The cops, they're like, oh yeah, it's in the shop. Right? I always laugh. What is the professional term for your mobile hero office on wheels?
um, just the ambulance.
Just the ambulance.
Yeah,
See,
yeah. The
I wasn't
unit,
lying. It's just an ambulance.
our unit.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Yeah, we
yeah,
don't have all those grandiose terms.
yeah. But it has to be, and I mean, I confess, I saw a video on TikTok. There was an influencer who was, domesticating an ambulance and taking apart all the guts. And I saw some things behind the panels. I've never seen that level of intricate wiring in a vehicle ever. It's got life support systems. it's got lighting, it's got emergency power, it's got like
Yeah.
all kinds of things. What's the training like just to understand the ambulance itself?
Oh, anytime we get a new model of ambulance, there's a training video that's sent out that each individual has to go over and then go through it, the ambulance themselves after they get this information. So depends on the depth of change that's happened. We might get actual hands-on with a trainer. When we got these new stretchers that had it's called a power load. Previously, you used to have to physically lift the stretcher. Somebody had to lift the wheels, and then the patient had to be walked in. One end would be balanced on the floor of the ambulance, but you would carry the rest of the load and walk it in. Now there is a power load that scoops the stretcher up itself, lifts the legs itself, so it's all automatic,
Wow.
automated.
I
So
imagine
something
that's a
like
lot of unreported back lifting hours, repetitive motion, bodily injuries. I imagine there's at least once or twice a year somebody catches a finger in a stretcher. Prior to certain technological advancements. Like,
certainly that's what brought this about was the back injuries and the injuries of people lifting these heavy loads. Now the cost, of course, of putting something in is also very high,
yeah,
but within 12 months, they got back 80% of the money they spent on the equipment backloaded from the back injuries and such. So they
okay.
saved that money, saved the paramedics' injuries and such. So
Well, saving paramedics injuries and sparing people all undue suffering is definitely what I would put up there with stewardship of your people. It's a culture, it's a community. First responders, that probably better than anybody, there's a certain type of person that's drawn to that industry, and for whatever reason, I feel like just knowing you and knowing some of these people also, it's sort of like the contract of sacrifice. I know it's coming. I'm gonna get hurt in the line of duty. I'm doing it anyway. I'll put in all this time and work and effort with class work and upgrading my skills, learning this new technology, putting in hours and hours and hours. But you get injured, and like, what's the process? Is there enough stewardship for what's happening?
that's the great changes that have been happening. There's been a big influx of money put into the ambulance service, and they're using it wisely. I mean, there's still not enough money. Let's be honest. We were neglected for so long that we're so far behind the eight ball. Trying to catch up is just costly. Our budget for our facilities alone, we're $1.3 billion behind in fixing them to up to standards. So that's just one
I
facet.
didn't even wait to hear if it was a good thing or a bad thing. I just heard $1.3 billion. I said, "Wow." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, we're behind that much. That's even worse." And like,
Yeah.
like to have an injection of 1.3, what a tremendous number. Wow. Ooh, we're
We're
behind that
behind.
much.
Yeah.
Scratch that. I'm gonna have to do a creative edit with a sticker or something. Wah, wah. How is 2024 compared to the days of yesteryear? Are they
Mm.
really are they looking back? Are they clawing back services? What's the viewpoint of how it is versus how it was?
Well, first thing I'd like to comment is on how they're putting us in the forefront now, providing us with more services. You said, what happens if somebody gets injured? Well, we now have a program where we're keeping employees on the payroll so they can continue to engage with their brethren. And because we have a different way of looking at life because of the job that we do and such. So you have a good camaraderie with these people and something you don't quite get with, people, lay people, it's just a different mindset. So to keep them in that, healthy work environment, keep them engaged, we have a program now that keeps them there. Previously, you just went home and healed on your own.
Mm,
We have physiotherapy within days, like the next day potentially starting for you.
nice.
So mental health also, like they're putting
Hmm.
a lot of money into that and supporting us.
Well, as they should. I mean, whether or not you've got a radio on your hip, obviously, radio check, keeping communication open, whether or not you've got a radio on your hip or a firearm on your hip, or if you're carrying, you've got like resources into a dangerous area, you deserve to be taken care of. You deserve to have systems in place that ensure that you're not just going to be cut from the team and ten people rise up to take your place and then you're a statistic. And there's so many unfortunate statistics, almost to the detriment of sharing them. It's just so mind-blowing to think about how many men and women we're losing in the first responder community, despite the networks, despite the supports. There's still a stigma. What are your what are your thoughts on addressing the stigma of injury and recovery? Because no one likes to get injured. Everyone knows how difficult it is to recover, but when you've got that idea that you've let people down or that you're being replaced, I can only imagine how much more difficult that is.
or that I'm weak. For many years in the ambulance service, it was very simply suck it up. Got another call to do.
Yeah.
You're just a warm body in the seat. For somebody, like you said, one call away from filling your position, and whether it be full time or just for the day. So it was a very poor environment. And now we have a lot more support that is very positive. It's slow. Change doesn't happen overnight,
Mm.
but it's definitely positive direction that we're going currently. People are feeling supported. We have a CISM program, critical incident stress management. So, for instance, you do a call. There's several people involved in the call, like paramedics in different levels, and the call is very serious. Maybe we call them moral injuries now.
Mm.
So potentially, they're going to have some kind of a moral injury from this call. A supervisor will then take it upon themselves, call the CIS program, tell the brief story about what happened, individuals involved, and then they will be contacted by this program coordinator and then set up with an individual from the team and have a discussion right away about how they're feeling, how to process things, and where to go from here. So very positive.
That's incredibly effective in its presentation. I mean, the way you say it's sort of like it even allows like, hey, if it's 24, 48 hours, even if it's 72 hours, we go 3 full days. Well, that first 3 full days, that then belongs to the now employee patient who's at home, presumably recovering with their family or recovering somewhere comfortable. It's like, hey, we're even going to give you a couple days while we do this work on your behalf so that you can process in your own way. That really sounds amazing. I wish
Mhm.
that happened at more levels. As far as bureaucracy goes. I mean, we think about how many people are being, not literally, but not literally left out in the cold. I mean,
Mhm.
depending on what riding in Canada you're talking about, there are people who are literally freezing, and that, as much as I know it bothers me and bothers you, it's sort of what's the unfortunate imbalance, that we're facing with government and bureaucracy and systematic, like it's sort of like, well, there's preferential treatment over here or preferential treatment over there. What's it been like serving with the women in the ambulance force?
I think it's great, because I think diversity is our power,
I
right?
agree. Yep.
And everybody in the service comes from a different background,
Yep.
different nationalities. We have such a diverse group of people. It's great when you go on a call and perhaps, they can interact with somebody in a different language
Yeah.
or just, being a familiar type of face versus some, older white guy coming into a younger, there's all those
Exactly.
dynamics
And
that
and forgive me
play
for
into it.
for misspeaking, regardless of how a paramedic identifies, male or female or otherwise. Serving as a paramedic, I imagine is empowering for everyone, and like you said, diversity is key, and offering perspective and being able to help someone because of your personal lens. It's sort of it feels like the perfect recipe for working in a high stress job.
Mhm.
Um, how many people would you say are pursuing the aftercare services on average? Has it become something that's just really, really, really encouraged? Is it now something that's just part of like a mandatory mechanism? Is there like what's the willingness to privilege ratio? Like is everyone just this is what you're getting? Hopefully you're on board with it. Is there ever any I don't want to say refusal, but is there any ever hesitance?
Certainly. Yeah, there's still pushback from some people. You know, they have a preconceived notion about how this looks or whatever. So they may say no, but it's automatically put forward to them as an option.
Hmm.
It's not like, as a supervisor, I do work as a supervisor at times, and my job is not to go and say, "Oh, in a group of people, what do you think? Do you want it? Do you want it? Do you want it?"
That
This
would
is a
be a
peer
little
pressure situation
yeah, that'd
now
be a
and
little
stuff like that.
stressful.
So you just let them know. Say, just let I'm, I'm activating the service for you guys. Expect a call maybe today or maybe tomorrow, and
Just that
leave it at that.
just that level of
Yeah,
communication. Yeah, I feel like the way you say it, it does sort of put the power of consideration back into the individual's hands because you're right. You mentioned it before. Just that word weakness, just that word, like activating so many other concepts that for us as humans with PTSD. A lot of us now are struggling. They're finding the highest numbers of neurodivergent actual like diagnoses for people. Well, yeah, you've been struggling with this for however long. It's sort of, I think, a very interesting scientific chapter in human history, but albeit it's incredibly difficult. And I cannot imagine some of the stressors that come from that aspect of the job. Pivoting towards list of stressors, how do you compartmentalize, man? Like we've had a lot of like hundreds of hours of off camera chats as buddies, as good friends, but what is it about that mindset that allows you to keep going, man?
I live in the moment. Um, when I'm there with that individual, that's my priority. I do my best I can to the extent of my training. And if that is not sufficient for their needs, that's unfortunate, but I can't take that home,
Yeah.
because the government has decided that this level of training is adequate in this area so that, I go there with that level of training. And if that patient exceeds that level of training and they have some ill effects because of it, these are the moral traumas that we take home.
Mhm.
Right? But living in the moment and doing the best I can for that individual and being a good patient advocate when we get to the hospital and identifying what I found for their issues to be
Yeah.
so that they can get appropriate treatment, then I can, fortunately, I may be unusual, but just wipe it from the slate. By the end of the day, I could hardly tell you, like, I have to think about what we did.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm an anomaly, I think.
I yeah, I think a lot of people would love to download that anomaly to be able to separate themselves in that way. For I mean, what I can only just call self preservation, because I mean we have almost the complete flip side job. As an actor for 20 plus years, it's been my job to extrapolate as much as I possibly can, internalize it as much as possible, let it sort of bounce around my meat suit while people record me, and then they go, "Ooh, so entertaining," and I'm like, "Great, awesome, cut. Can I go home now? I want to eat a cookie in the shower and cry a little bit. That was too real. That was nuts." I have played paramedics. I have played paramedics that were in totally lackluster, question and answer mode. And then, of course, paramedics in the hole, over my neck and into the thing with my tool. And it's like, it's really nerve wracking. The idea that I wouldn't have a script to go off of and be like, okay, okay. And I mean, I've even done a little bit of like, sort of first aid training and, various aspects of life. But yeah, that stuff lapses. You're like, I don't even know what to do. Um, you know, how deep does that training go? Because I've seen you flip at like a campground. Remember that kid that got winded? You're like, bam. I was like, I'm still looking for the kids, mom. It's 20 plus,
31.
31 years. I was going to say 25, but 31 years in the service.
Yeah. Coming December 1st, it'll be started my 32nd year.
Wow. Congratulations, man.
Thanks.
Thank you for wearing the uniform. Thank you for serving not only British Columbians, but generations of paramedics to come. How are they doing? You think how are they coming up? Are you proud of new paramedics?
I'm very proud of the knowledge that they have. They fortunately come in at a time when the training is already set. We have a national standard now. Previously, we were patching a new course on top of an old course for some paramedics, and then training other paramedics with fully trained all the new courses. And so it was this hodgepodge of training. So now their knowledge is great. I think that the new generation, however, struggles with the difficulties of the job. They do have they do have to build this tolerances because they do take a lot home.
Yeah,
I think we're calling CIS for patients
a lot
or
more.
paramedics a lot more.
Is it a more emotional generation, or has all the trauma caught up with us and sort of made itself into a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy?
I'm really not sure. Like I don't think we're as hardy as we used to be in our emotional, you know, stability. I think that there's changes in that regard.
Mm.
I don't think that we have the resilience as we used to.
Mm.
Yeah. And so trying to build that in these new paramedics is one of my staples of what they need. They've got, like I said, they've got the training. They do need some training in driving because they've only driven a Honda Civic prior to this, and now they're driving a 2-ton truck. But,
That's a big important shiny bullet that
yeah,
needs to get somewhere very, very, yeah, very Mario Kart right now to the front of the line. Yeah, that's a big responsibility.
and
Is the technology and maybe the way younger paramedics grew up, is that offering them a bit of an edge?
for sure, yeah, us older guys, we get a new computer and now no more paperwork, and it's just it was a learning curve for us for
Yeah,
sure. And of
just sort
course,
of
they jump in, they're
have
like,
to
"Oh,
adjust our glasses
yeah,
and lean in a little. All right, get the coffee on. We got to learn a new program. Yeah.
yeah," and the younger guys are like, "Oh, finally, you caught up. Let's get on."
You're like, oh, dude, I've been doing this on my phone, just hanging out in the background for like the last 10 minutes. Yeah, I like to think that the generation of younger people coming up, whether they're in the armed services, of the military, or whether they are working in the first responders. I'd like to think that the technology will get better and will get easier to handle and manage and download and upload. But more importantly, I'm excited to hear that there's fewer mortality, challenges in the job and in the workplace, because no one wants to no one wants to not go home. Like I don't know how many other people wake up with the sentiment, like, not today, Satan. But I mean, like most of us, like, it's not my day. And I mean, the roads, I feel, personally, I feel the roads this year have been really dangerous. And maybe it's just there's more media coverage, maybe there's more people covering things or contributing to media, but it feels like the roads are dangerous.
Certainly is. Yeah, there was more accidents this year for whatever reason. Not sure what the cause of that is, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just maybe slow down. Let life take a minute, so that a minute doesn't take your life. That's one of the sentiments my dad shared with me when I was younger and getting behind the wheel and driving. And you think about it. I mean, just because the speedometer goes all the way up to that number in the corner doesn't mean you ever need to get there. And I mean, outside of like someone testing a vehicle or a trained driver or someone in the first responders industry, you got to be able to champion that drive, just that one drive. All the other drives don't exist in the moment for the benefit of this patient. What do you feel that it sort of offers itself as the biggest challenge for new paramedics coming up? What if the technology just doesn't deliver the kind of success in the moment that they need? What's the backup to foundational skills?
I see that they're doing fairly well with that. We do have good backups in place. They seem to very well know when to quit on the good equipment and go back to the basics.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, I think it's been trained very well. This new program, the PCP training, is a very good start for us.
awesome.
And they're actually changing it. I don't quote me on this, but I think they're making it a diploma program. It's going to be a 2-year program soon. So
Good.
yeah, so it's going to be even more depth, and we're going to have much better trained paramedics on the street.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because, I think about, like the generational frustration with, different skill sets and then the introduction of technology and then the introduction of remote work in dangerous places with dangerous weather and the equipment shuts down. New generations might find that challenging. I'm really happy to hear that the foundational skills that will not be the case, and hopefully, again, with someone at the helm like yourself out there in the middle of a disaster, they're just gonna hopefully open their ears and do the job that's at hand. That kind of focus that you talk about. What's the future of the paramedics circle of the first responders look like when we think about like just I don't know if you saw Elon Musk unleashing the cyber bus, the cyber taxi, the army of cyber robots, etc., very much in a I robot we robot kind of way. That event, do you think that AI and autonomous, you know, I hesitate to call them anything other than beings. Do you think that there's a place for them in the first responder world? Could you ever ride with a paramedic that had a motherboard and not a mother? I worked on that joke for a long time. I hope it works
Well
out.
done.
Thank you, thank you. I had to I lost sleep over that
I certainly can see them coming ahead, or more technology bringing forward into the paramedic world. Like maybe vehicles will drive themselves, and we'll just have a couple paramedics who can work together instead of somebody being tasked with driving.
one. Right,
2 paramedics still, but you're both working with the patient. Would be better for patient care, right?
right.
Um,
Hopefully, driver training would still be mandatory.
mhm,
Along their foundational routes to have that skill set.
just in
But
case. Yeah.
to sit in the back and work on someone in the best of circumstances requires a lot of trust for that person behind the wheel. I imagine it would take a lot of deep breathing to, like for future generations of paramedic. Obviously, it won't be as much of a deal, but to put your faith in, an automated vehicle to drive you safely to a hospital or to a even an off-road ambulance, like get us to the helipad. We're up on a logging road. We need to work on this guy. Like, is the outlook good?
I'm not sure. I struggled. I got to drive an electric vehicle recently that had the auto self drive, and I was very hesitant to let my hands off the wheel. Even so, having nobody up front would make me awfully nervous. But
Mm,
as long as it was tested and showed good outcomes, I would say, for better patient care, I think that would be a great thing.
yeah,
And as far as heavy search and rescue, I think that at one point in time, because we had the dogs going on the piles and looking for people and things
yeah.
like that, I can see having equipment or AI robots doing the searches.
Like robot sniffer dogs who can actually like scientifically prove that's a heat signature. I have thermal vision. I can maybe smell a gas leak, or I can smell perfume, or I can smell just like the human form. I imagine that would be great because no one wants to think about it, but I mean, even animals in the line of duty, we salute you canines. Um, an unstable building falls apart or gets crushed, like you lose another warrior in the fight to save people. I would love to see AI dogs, maybe not getting crushed by buildings, but maybe not a
Yeah,
dog getting crushed by a
yeah.
building. Maybe that's speciesist. I don't know if I'm sort of degrading robots as beings, but I mean they're not completely sentient. And I know that all of this future talk is kind of fun, but on that topic, imagine 1,000 years from now, if technology persists and there's media out there, about really heroic moments and really awesome stories, what would you want people to stumble across that has Sean Pennett's name? What would you want your legendary, timeless stamp to be?
Hmm, that's a good one.
Well, that's my pop question.
That is a tough question, all right. I struggle with that because I don't, like you said, hero without a cape. I'm not the guy who runs around and tells my stories to anybody and everybody. Even if you ask, you have to pry. I'm not a bragger. I am proud of what I do.
You should be.
And I very much enjoy helping other people, and the legacy that I really enjoy being part of, not just the ambulance service, but the heavier urban search and rescue team. Being on the logistics squad, which is the core of the team. Again, helper, right? Like I'm not just helping the individuals in the field, that I'm helping them so they can help the patients in the field that they're retrieving. So I'm all part of that chain, but I love to be at the core of helping them. The heavy urban search and rescue team is my standing favorite.
Amazing, man. Last question. What is your best medicine? What do you do to make sure that that piece left on the job, you take it off with the uniform? What do you do for yourself that keeps you on course?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I have 8 acres, and I quite enjoy land. I have animals.
Dirt.
I love the dirt, man. Get your shoes off, your feet in the dirt, get grounded. Also, animals. I love animals. Connecting with them. We have goats and pot-belly pig and dogs and cats and that kind of thing. But I also love getting out in nature, whether that be hunting or fishing or just camping or hiking. Yeah, that really grounds me and brings me back to.
That's amazing, man. Thank you for sharing all of that. Of course, it's all stuff that I know and love about you, but of course, being able to share with everyone is really what this is all about. Because it doesn't take more than a glance out the window to know that things are changing and that the world is challenged now on the daily with things that we never previously thought about, conceived of, or heard about. Communication, it is what it is. But Best Medicine, our show, we have obviously the Laughter's Best Medicine. It's our show coming up November 12th at the Chilliwack Cultural Center. Very excited. We got ticket sales coming up very soon. We are trying to make sure that there's enough representation, vulnerable, truthful, genuine representation for just average people. It doesn't matter what your passport says. It doesn't matter where you were born or what you practice. If you're practicing positivity and if you're in any way part of the forum that props that up and celebrates that and shares that, then that's really what we're about, and that's really what we're fighting for, is to make sure that the dialogue has enough representation and that the voices connect on as many different sides of our wonderful world as possible. So, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today, for all of your time and your stories, your expertise. You've been so good. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Absolutely,
I
man.
really appreciate the opportunity, and I also appreciate that you're doing this. That you're putting the word out there that we need to keep an eye on each other because we're not very good at looking after ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, as someone who struggles with my own alphabet reasons and neurodivergent reasons, self care is hard. But radio checking your friends and checking in with your community and telling people that you love them. I mean, it really is as simple as that. Sometimes, mom's golden rule. You got to treat people how you want to be treated, and don't be too surprised when the universe delivers you a wonderful existence. So, thank you again, my friend. I appreciate you. Thank you, all of you, for joining us here. From myself, from my Ian. I'm gonna leave that in. My Ian says we love you, and my Ian says we're thinking about you. And please, 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 like, share, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow along on all of our socials, and you have yourself an amazing day. One more time, thank you to Sean Penner. Thank you to everyone out there wearing the uniform in the first responders community and the armed services branches. Thank you so much. We love you. We see you. We hear you. And we hope the very best for you.